That was the best 20 seconds of the entire conference. And you laughed too loud at that. I've just been checking out some of the social media. The social media hashtag for our conference is TTDC23. If you're on social or if you're watching virtually, hello, welcome back. You already know that. And I've been just looking at some of the pictures that have been taken of us from DC. Now, just because you're online does not mean that you cannot be on that hashtag. So what I recommend you do, take your phone, take a picture of the conference on your computer and post it, right? Selfie. Thank you. I'll be looking out for them a little bit later and I will like every single one that I find. Okay. Our conference theme for Transforming Transportation 2023 is accelerating toward green and inclusive mobility. This next session, Plenary 3, is about how. How do you do that? We are going to be focusing on accelerating innovation. And we do that with our keynote speaker, Andrew Steer, who is the president and CEO of the Bezos Earth Fund and a friend, very good friend, of TT. Hello, Andrew.
Thank you, Femi. Thank you, World Bank. Thank you, WRI, and happy 20th anniversary. What a wonderful meeting this is already today. As president of WRI, I came here to 8 of these events, and every year seem to get better and better, and I think this one is the best of all. So it's a great honor to be back with you. Thank you so much. So look, there we are, accelerating innovation. You've all heard the numbers today. Transport accounts for 15% of greenhouse gas emissions. If we don't solve transport, we don't solve climate change. And we all know what we need to do. We've got to reduce where we don't need transport. We've got to shift to less polluting forms of transport, especially non-motorized. And we've got to decarbonize both light vehicles and also the hard-to-abate vehicles. And by the way, we also, most important of all, for most of the countries we work in, we've got to provide good, safe access. So we sort of know how we're going to get there, but it is very, very difficult. We're still climbing the mountain, remember. If you look at this, this goes up until, 2030 before we start really coming down again. There are many such projections. This is one that's very credible. And then we come down the mountain, hopefully. And it's light vehicles, it's heavy vehicles, it's aviation, it's shipping, it's moving to non-motorized, a whole range of issues here. And of course, if you go to the System Change Lab, which please do, look up their website, you'll see for every single shift, you'll see that we're actually off course. So the one that goes up, which is this one? This is number of kilometers of rapid transit. This is a good quality bicycle paths. And you see just how incredible the journey is. This is light vehicles and so on. And you can go to the System Change Lab, see all of these, and you can debate them. Some people would say the trajectory is a little bit different, but we sort of know where we have to go. But here's the point. We won't be able to get anywhere unless we innovate. And let's remember what innovation is. It's not just brand new technologies. It's actually new ways of doing business. It's a new idea, a new method, a new device. It's the introduction of something new. And if we don't do that at scale, we will not succeed. And you've probably all read the books that say actually there are 4 types of innovation. There's sort of incremental, or sometimes called sustaining. That means you just keep improving year after year after year, bring down those cost curves, become more effective. Second, at the other end of the spectrum, basic research, really in the laboratory and so on. Then you have what's called breakthrough, when suddenly it's a kind of aha moment. And then you have disruptive. And disruptive is when actually you take on the vested interests and you reshape things. Now, we're going to need all 4 types of innovation, but as you can imagine, particularly 3 and 4 are going to be quite important. Now, yesterday was a very sad day because Dick Fosbury died yesterday. Dick Fosbury, this is him in the 1968 Olympics. And as a high school, he's 21 years old here. As a high school student, everybody laughed at him. They made fun of him because he tried to jump backwards. He won the gold medal. And 4 years later, he was the only one that jumped like this in 1968. 4 years later, every single person in the final of the high jump jumped like this. And the interesting thing is, I mean, I know you're experts at the history of high jumping, and some of you, I can look at you down there, Roger, you've probably been one of these. But actually, it started with the scissors, it then moved to the Western roll, it then moved to the straddle, which was a breakthrough in 1936. These were all evolutionary changes. Then came the Fosbury flop. That was disruptive, and it was a breakthrough. And it changed, well, didn't change the world, but it certainly changed high jumping. So that's what we have to look for. And there's lots of publications coming out now that are dealing with this kind of thing. This is one that we brought out together with the System Change Lab and Systemic. We launched it at Davos this year. It basically says, we keep talking about tipping points, but how do we actually know we're at tipping points? How would we anticipate a tipping point? How do we accelerate towards a tipping point? And then recognizing it's not just one tipping point, it's a cascade of tipping points. This is what we have to search for. And so if you go to that publication, you'll see lots of really interesting things asking, okay, where does the technology need to come to? This is electrolyzers. That is needed to generate green hydrogen, which is absolutely essential. And you'll see the green line here is the cost curve coming down. And you see we've got about 60% of where we need to get to. Getting the rest of the way is very hard. But unless we get the rest of the way, you can see that bottom line, that's how much we actually are doing of green hydrogen. And the answer is almost none. Why? Because it's more expensive. But by 2030, we'll have a tipping point if we work hard. That's what we're all about today. And what the job of everyone in this room is, whether you're a World Banker, whether you're United Nations, whether you're the private sector, a researcher, a government, it's to figure out how do we create the environment in which innovation that is required will take place. And I want to suggest there are 5 things that we need. We need a narrative that inspires. We need a systems change mindset. We need leadership that takes risks. We need smart politics and opportunities seized. And we need big thinking. And let me just illustrate that. First, the narrative that inspires. Take today, we've talked quite a bit about electric buses. So if the question is, should we electrify the 480 school buses in this country because of climate change? You'd say, actually, it's not the most sensible thing to do. Why? Because a regular bus costs $100,000. An electric bus costs $350,000. And even if you look at the total cost of running it, it's still 50% more to do an electric bus. It actually is not very good per ton of carbon saved. And so, but if you then say, actually, poor children going to school in the United States in a poor county breathe air that is deeply dangerous, it will lower their learning capacity, it could lower their life expectancy. And then you say, actually, 96% of all the buses currently, electric buses built in China, wouldn't it be good to have some economy going here? Yes, it actually would. So there's an economic case to be made. And then you say, actually, all these young people going to school in a clean bus, you link the curriculum to that, you teach them, they talk to their parents, an intergenerational transfer of knowledge. And then actually, in those long summer months, it's possible that utilities will pay up to $10,000 a year to use the battery storage, which will save other power plants being built. And then you start thinking, my word, this is actually a good deal. And then, oh, by the way, it also helps address climate change. So when the Bezos Earth Fund decided to put $50 million into this, it was precisely because there was a narrative that was irresistible. And, you know, this is the Financial Times day before yesterday. You know, Mayor Hidalgo has a narrative that is not irresistible to all people, by the way, but the 15-minute city, you can get your head around it. Yes, we want to become part of that. So first, you need a narrative. Second, you need a system change mindset. Let's just stay with the issue of school buses. Could have picked any issue, by the way. There are no silver bullets. If you go to the federal government and say, could you electrify the buses? They'll say, no. If you go to school district, they'll say, are you crazy, $350 million? No. $350,000? No. But if you bring together a coalition of the school districts, the bus operators, the federal government, the utilities, parents associations, manufacturers, advocates, municipal governments, financial institutions, state, and you bring them together, you start getting this kind of virtuous upward cycle. And that's what WRI and its partners are doing. That's why we're working with them on this. And as you may know, 5 years ago, there were 200 electric buses out of 480,000. By 2030, every school bus in this country that's sold will probably be electric. It certainly won't be diesel. That's the transformation you need. It won't happen without this kind of approach. Let me give you another example. Everybody talks rightly about green shipping lanes. In order to do that, you need green hydrogen. But actually, you can't make a lot of green hydrogen just for shipping. And so we work with the Mission Possible Partnership. And what they've come up with the idea is let's have hubs where we bring shipping together with cement, together with steel, all of whom need green hydrogen. Then you can get the financing to come in for green hydrogen because it costs a lot of money. Then you bring the utilities in because utilities are required in order to provide electricity for the green hydrogen. And you start really getting somewhere. Third, you need leadership that takes risks. Stay with this for a moment, the school buses. I thought I'd stick with a common story here. You've got to identify those who are really making a difference. New York, California, the race to electrify America. You've got to identify them. Whatever area you're in, find the leaders, support them, and get them to go to work. And what you see here now around this country, as led again, as I say, California, New York, now others are coming on board. That's what leadership can do. That's what Maersk is doing in green shipping. It's making a bold decision, doesn't really know how it's going to get there. We need to support leaders. Colombia, Bogota, incredible leadership led originally to bus rapid transit. Now it's leading to bicycle lanes, to a greening of the city. Leaders make a difference. Fourth, smart policies, opportunities seized. You don't know what's going to come down the pike. We didn't know there was going to be an Inflation Reduction Act, but we needed to be ready for it. So when it came, we threw everything at it in terms of lobbying. And it wasn't just WRI, many players, lots of briefing notes, visiting 100 different Congress people, pushing them, getting them, lobbying from their districts and so on. Be ready. Be ready to identify blockers. Be more sophisticated when it comes to politics. And by the way, politics is not just about politicians, it's about coalitions. Get the car companies to compete with each other, get them to talk to each other. Amazing trajectory here, you see, where you see this revolution in real time. Finally, big thinking. It is a myth to believe that it's easier to do small things than big things. There are leaders out there that respond to big things. Let me give you some examples. Here are the commitments, you've seen them before, that countries have made to ending the internal combustion engine. And bold politicians have said, we're going to get rid of them by 2035, or if you're Norway, by 2025. If you're Boris Johnson, I don't know if he thought about it very much, he said 2030. He was right. He was right. And do you know what? Every single economic model that runs that will tell you, well, good idea, Mr. Prime Minister, but it's going to cost your economy. You're going to lose competitiveness. That's because the economic models are profoundly wrong. They live in an equilibrium world. They don't live in the disequilibrium world with disruption that we have, where massive shifts of expectations can open up new opportunities. And that's why Prime Minister Modi, when he came into office, and they were going to go to 20 gigawatts, and he said, let's go to 100 gigawatts of solar. And now much more of that. It wasn't because he was a member of the Sierra Club. It was because he understood the power of disruptive change, and he understood shifting expectations. Aim for big things. So those are the 5 things that all of us, I believe, as we now come to this panel to talk about real technological change, that we can play a helpful role. You've all seen these slides before. Essentially, you know, in 1900, there wasn't a single automobile on Fifth Avenue, all horses. And 13 years later, you can see 1 or 2 horses, but 90%. That's how rapidly things change, and that's how rapidly things can change right here and now. This is global EV sales. These are the buses that I talked about. Nothing, 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 then suddenly. And it's only beginning, and it's profoundly exciting. So do turn to the System Change Lab, a situation room which will take you through all of these transitions and try and identify the tipping points and identify the special sauce that is required to get there. And then get on your jumping shoes. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Andrew. Hello, panel. Panel, would you come on stage? Thank you. We've got David, Manuela, Victoria, Binyam. Andrew, come here for a second. Back up on stage. You're wearing a microphone, so that will work. Panel, please take a seat. Not the two end seats, the ones in the middle. Fantastic. People were taking pictures of your slides. That's very complimentary. Oh. Do they need to? Is there somewhere else they can get hold of your slides?
Yes, we can. Well, we're a $10 billion fund, but we could do with some more. So why do we say $100 each?
What?
No. You can, of course, you
going to the highest bidder.
The owner is here, and we'll give them to you, Femi, and
all right.
you can broadcast.
Oh, that's way too much admin.
It'd be a real honor.
All right.
So thank you very much.
Second question. The beginning of your keynote had Dick Fosbury in.
Yeah.
But when you planned it, did you plan it on Sunday? You planned it on Sunday, didn't you? Because he passed away on Sunday.
He passed away yesterday, actually. Yeah, he passed away yesterday. Yeah, we have to be ready to seize new information.
Right.
I mean, genuinely sad. Yeah. I mean, he made a big difference. So yes, so in other words, we hadn't prepared this at all until yesterday. Or it was very fresh. It was very fresh.
Very
That's
fresh.
Right. Good.
Thank you so much, Andrew Steer. This should be the best plenary because it's about innovation in policy, in regulation, in transport technology, how that innovation is helping us drive the climate crisis and handle the climate crisis, and also our development goals. No pressure. David, welcome. Hello. Tell our audience who you are.
Hi, Femi. Thanks very much for inviting me onto the panel. My name is David Mansfield. I am CFO of an electric vehicle company called VinFast. We are a Vietnamese company established 5 years ago only. And I think in the 5 years we've made massive strides, including becoming early last year an EV-only OEM, the first in the world. So that's me.
Good to have you. Manuela Lopez Mendez, welcome to the plenary stage at TT 2023. Please say hello to the audience online and in the room. Tell them who you are.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Manuela Lopez Menendez. I'm the Secretary of Transport and Public Works in Buenos Aires City, and I have been working in transport and mobility in the metropolitan area of Buenos Aires for the last 15 years. Thank you.
Good to have you. Binyam Reja, welcome.
Thank you.
Tell the audience who you are, how important you are.
Well,
Binyam, they're laughing when I said important in your name. I don't know why.
The only thing that I'm important about is organizing this thing. So from that point of view, I hope you think. So my name is Binyam Reja. I'm the practice manager for the Transport Global Unit here at the World Bank. And before coming back to Washington in 2021, I was based in Beijing as a regional practice manager for that part of the world.
Good to have you on the plenary panel. And Victoria Sheehan, welcome. Please say hello to our audience online and in the room.
Well, thank you. It's great to be with you all today. My name is Victoria Sheehan. I'm the Executive Director for the Transportation Research Board. TRB, as we call it, is part of the National Academies of Science, Engineering and Medicine. And really, we're tasked with mobilizing experts and experience to solve transportation challenges. We primarily work with stakeholders here in the United States. However, we have a number of international partnerships, and our work would not be as successful if it wasn't for those partnerships and the international friends and colleagues that we have contributing to our research.
Thank you. Thank you, plenary panel. Okay, Manuela, tell our audience something that will amaze them, that is so innovative, that has come from Buenos Aires.
Wow, what a question. Well, you know, we have been working in mobility in the last 15 years in Buenos Aires. We changed the way how people move in that city. We were able to work a lot with public transport, especially with our BRT corridors. We already have 8, we have 2 under construction, but we also had a revolution related with bicycles. We have more than 300 kilometers of bike lanes, and we have 10% of our trips every day are done by bicycle. But we are also working in all related. We don't only have buses, but we also have the metro line, but we also have suburban trains. So we are always working in making that experience better for all the people that travel every day to the city. Almost 3 million people come to the city every day. So every day we are looking for people to choose better mobility, especially public transport and non-motorized. And we had made a lot of work also in pedestrians. And one of the things that we have been working a lot, although we didn't yet start it, is the responsive demand transit. We have, as in many cities, some new neighborhoods that are informal neighborhoods that we have been working in formalizing them, making a lot of improvement with public works. We open streets, we made people feel safer there, but to those places we don't have public transport. So what we have been working a lot is to see if we can find ways to have this demand, the responsive demand transit, so that we can, with all the information we have about how people move and what the people need, to finally have transport there.
So that word innovation, it's quite a hard one, because it's almost like you're doing a humble brag. It's like, well, we innovated this. How do you know that the public in Buenos Aires appreciates what you're doing? How are they reacting to what you just shared with us?
Well, we have a lot of data collection almost every day. We have a lot of information, and we are always measuring what people think about the things we are doing and how people are shifting to other modes. So I think that that's the way that in these 15 years we have been measuring how people feel about the policies we have been doing.
Mm-hmm. Can you give us a quote, one that stays in your head?
Well, for example, we always say that we have, our BRT that is called Metrobus is a public policy that is very well known in Buenos Aires, and more than 90% of the people think that is a very good public policy. So, and this has been continuing the last 10 years.
David, tell us the story about VinFast.
Where to start?
At the beginning.
So at the beginning, I mentioned, we're a relatively young company, but given the topic of this plenary session is about innovation, I think what I'll do is I'll describe the effect that the adequate infrastructure around innovation can have. And I think some of the constraints and the motivators, the drivers of innovation are things they've already been mentioned on many of the other panels, but things like regulation, necessity being the mother of invention. If you mandate and legislate for something, then it's much more likely to happen. Capital is another big driver of innovation. Infrastructure, education, an educated workforce obviously helps with innovation and change. And I think in Vietnam, and with my company VinFast, all of those things have come together. Vietnam is one of the fastest growing countries in the world, certainly in ASEAN markets, the growth and engine driver in the world at the moment. In the last 5 years, we've managed to start our EV company from scratch. We have a large conglomerate behind us in Vingroup, which is the largest private conglomerate in Vietnam. But we've also got the benefit of the Vietnamese government, who's input the infrastructure, the educated workforce, the talented workforce, and the resources around it to drive innovation. So we have a whole suite of electric vehicles that we've now designed and are delivering into the Vietnamese market and into the global market. We are delivering electric buses onto the streets of Hanoi and other major cities in Vietnam. So really driving change and transportation, green mobility in those locations. And we're also transforming the two-wheeler market. So we produce a whole array of e-scooters as well. we've managed to do that at an incredibly fast pace, we think. So, as I said, over the course of the last 5 years, we've gone through a cycle of starting with combustion engine vehicles, but then giving up the manufacturing and delivery of those and becoming a pure play e-mobility company for both Vietnam and for the global market. I think those are major achievements, and we're pretty proud of them.
Binyam, are you Googling VinFast?
Yeah.
What were you searching for on your phone right there?
No, I was trying to figure out what kind of market penetration they have now.
Were you doing that live on the stage? You know you have a microphone. Turn around to David and speak to him.
Yeah, I think.
People are using phones way too much.
Well, let me give you some statistics. So
Talk to David.
We're about 40%.
I'm flabbergasted.
We are.
I know you're important, Binyam, but David's right here.
Yeah, so what is your market penetration? So
Well, we are 100% of the electric bus market in Vietnam, and actually the municipality in Hanoi has mandated that 100% of buses post-2025 will have to be electric. We're hoping to fulfill all of that capacity at VinFast. We're looking to export those e-buses to the States. Here we've got a model that works in the States and to Europe and elsewhere. So that's in the e-bus market. In the e-scooter market, we're about a 40% market share of the e-scooter market in Vietnam. That's every year. I mean, you have to really have traveled to Vietnam and Hanoi and the large metropolises in Southeast Asia to understand just how chaotic they are with motorcycles and two-wheel transport. But there's about 2.5 million two-wheel scooters sold in Vietnam every year. We expect to be just over 10% of that market this year and hope to grow that to, well, 100% eventually, but who knows?
As Chief Financing Officer, I would like to know your best day at work and why, and the day you went home and cried and thought, what am I doing here? Let's start with the worst day.
I mean, the worst, I think I can crystallize it. I mean, they both relate to the same thing. The best day,
yes.
Well, so the worst day is when you get a call from somebody who says they don't want to lend you money. And the best day is when you get a call from somebody that says they do want to lend you money.
Ooh, Victoria, I would like to know some of what you predict will be some of the most innovative developments in transportation. Either that you're seeing now or you predict in the future, where you're researching it and you're thinking, this is interesting.
Well, let me start by sharing a little bit more about who we are at the Transportation Research Board.
Sure.
So we have about 8,500 volunteers who make our work possible. We are doing research in every area of transportation. So today's agenda really resonates with me. The conversations that we're having at this event mirror the conversations that we've been having across the TRB community. And the good news, Andrew alluded to it earlier, is that our industry, especially here in the United States, is well positioned to now leverage some of the funding that's available as we seek to accelerate the pace of deployment of technologies and new solutions. So we at the Transportation Research Board have been around for a little bit longer than David's organization. We're in our 103rd year. So we have a model that we believe really does work, bringing together practitioners as well as academics to solve those transportation challenges of the day, but also to prepare for the future. So in the short term, we're focused on showcasing the work that we've already undertaken. Like I said, here in the United States, it's a very exciting time to work in transportation. We are investing at levels that we never have in the past. And so we want to make sure that all of that research that was done previously is brought to bear, especially when it comes to exposing individuals to those big ideas that were piloted elsewhere in the country. Not everybody has that same passion for taking risks. Big risks have big rewards. And so to ensure that every area of transportation is moving forward, every corner of our country is moving forward, we need to make sure that we're showcasing what's worked and truly also diving into those lessons learned and what didn't work to make sure that individuals aren't repeating what's happened in some of those projects that weren't as successful. And so the Transportation Research Board has been looking at how do we really leverage new materials. We've been doing a lot of work around decarbonization, climate change and resiliency, of course, have been a focus for our entire industry. But also, how can we streamline our processes? How can we deliver projects more quickly and remove those barriers when it comes to successful implementation? And so it's a really exciting time to be in this role as executive director because I get to see so many innovations across our industry. And like I said, we've been teased by the opportunities for so long, and to finally have the financial resources to move the needle is really, it's a revolutionary time in some respects. And so we at the Transportation Research Board are trying to convene, like I said, to share those best practices and also continue to do the necessary work to understand what those gaps are in terms of successful deployment. And so it's hard to name just one thing because as Andrew said in his keynote to kick off the conversation, it's not just about the technology or that exciting widget that we're deploying. It's really about how can we do everything much more efficiently, accelerate deployment, and really, at the end of the day, this is about the people that use our transportation systems, that rely on the goods and services that travel on our networks, and how can we provide a higher quality in terms of level of service for those individuals, but a greener, safer, smarter system for everyone.
So are you talking about systems then, rather than products or anything that you couldn't show and tell, anything that you've seen that you would like to showcase? It's more about how we think and put it all together.
Correct. I think TRB has 177 standing committees. So we have a lot of experts who have worked in one field of transportation. They are the go-to individuals when it comes to that particular, like I said, material, solution, mode of transportation. But what we're really experiencing right now is this need to break down silos, to talk about collaboration, and to make sure that we're solving these lofty problems together and really bringing individuals at every level to the table for the conversation. Also increasing diversity, equity, inclusion, making sure that those who are using our system are represented as we're making decisions. And so a lot of the innovation right now is not just about the tools, the things that we're using, it's the how we're having the conversations to make sure that the systems that we build today, like I said, really do meet the needs of those who rely on the transportation network. But in addition to that, as we're deploying the technologies and the solutions, that we're not letting the technology lead, that we are really ensuring that the technology is solving the underlying problems and improving quality of life for everyone.
Not letting the technology lead. Give us an example where it has.
So look at some of the micromobility solutions. Very exciting, lots of potential. And we need those innovators to be thinking about the next set of transportation solutions. But at the same time, policymakers can't be caught flat-footed. We have to think about how to deploy in a way that works for everyone. And so, again, there's lots of lessons learned that can be applied as we think about now the next set of disruptive technologies. With the investment, especially here in the United States, in EV charging infrastructure and the commitments that we've talked about throughout today to increase the number of electric and hybrid vehicles on the road, there is policy decisions now that are going to ensure that those technologies are leveraged and move forward effectively. When it comes to connected and automated technologies, we're still somewhat lacking from a policy perspective. And so a lot of the conversations are around how can we really have a roadmap to the future. Supply chain and all of these issues that can hinder deployment really need to be part of the early conversations so that industry is ramping up and has capacity that when the next infrastructure bill is passed or those dollars are made available, everybody is ready to go to work and make sure that we provide the best possible solutions.
David has his thoughtful face on, but before you let loose, David, I have to go to Binyam. And Binyam, because you work with so many countries and some of the most extraordinary innovations comes from countries that don't necessarily have a big GDP, but they've got an extraordinary young population, a population that is ready to move forward. We've got leapfrog technology. So there's a lot that I've seen over the years where I'm going, whoa, we don't have that in DC or America or the UK. Share with us some of those innovations.
Okay, thank you, Femi, for that question. So yeah, I mean, innovation is not just a global north thing. You're absolutely right. There's a lot in the global north that's happening in a number of areas in the transport sector, whether it's about bike sharing system, for example, in China, in Beijing, once they just exploded, and they were all over. And then that actually came here to do that. We have a kind of trying to organize the informal sector in terms of using technology, using apps to regulate them, to bring them on board. But there is also kind of other big item innovations that we see in many developing countries, or in general. It's not really unique to developing countries, but it also comes from the global north, is the intelligent transportation system that they deploy to manage the traffic on the intersections. So so that way you can optimize the traffic flow. I think this morning you heard from the mayor of Lima where they are trying to do with World Bank project partnership in optimizing the intersection traffic flows. We also see quite a lot of digital platforms that are actually used to manage demand or to communicate within each other the different submodes that can help you in parking management, in developing travel demand management. But then also if we go to China, in Beijing, for example, they used all the taxis that they go through around the city and then put transpondent into them, and then can determine the level of congestion that you would see on the road. So, and then you can have different kind of gradient, whether that highway is severely congested, etc. So you see quite a lot of innovations, bits and pieces there. Again, two-wheelers and three-wheelers are a big part of the innovation. We heard quite a bit of that this morning. Active mobility, walking, actually the kind of things we're now talking about green and inclusive mobility. It's already happening in developing countries. The vast majority of the people walk and take public transport. But that's besides the point. But I just want also to say how actually in the World Bank, how we approach innovation in general. I think Andrew was talking about doing this kind of first research and then moving to breakthrough. So when there is like a new agenda item, when there is a new innovation that's happening in the global north or overall in the world, then we have to look at it, whether this kind of innovation makes sense for developing countries, what is the economic cost, whether it's financially affordable, does it have any fiscal impact. So a good example is our recent report on the economics of e-mobility. So everybody talks e-mobility basically being dominated in China, US, and the European markets. But the fact of the matter is, when we actually looked at is for 20 countries, we did a scoping modeling exercise to see whether there's an economic and climate case for it. But clearly, 15 out of the 20 countries already e-mobility makes sense for buses and two-wheelers and three-wheelers. And then you add the climate benefits that Andrew talked about earlier, then you get into 18 countries that actually already make sense. So we see the economics of it, and then but they also have to see the fiscal implication of this, because this is an expensive undertaking. Unlike the US, we don't have Uncle Bill and IRA that has a $1 trillion. Thank you, Ben, for your plug this morning. I think I'll use it. So the fiscal space is extraordinarily limited, so we have to see how we prioritize it, how we work with international partners to bring funding and knowledge in making this happen. So quite a lot of things are happening, yeah.
So I'm going to open this conversation up to the room. and also to our online audience as well. So Grace will be standing by in just a moment. David, what were you thinking? Go ahead, share it with us, please.
I was just thinking, look, I guess no conversation about innovation in transportation would be complete without talking about autonomous driving. So I was wondering if Victoria could share with us whether or not she thought Elon Musk was correct in terms of when autonomous driving would be available in the US.
Is that a serious question? Because we're all chuckling quietly to ourselves. Remind us, what was the date?
It was before the singularity, I know that. I don't know, I think 18 months time.
Okay. Victoria, what do you think? What's research telling you?
So what I would say is I would hope that we could accelerate the pace of deployment. Every indication from the data that's been collected so far is that the number of fatalities here in the United States for 2022 will be around 46,000, which is an increase from 2021, where I think we had hit a 16-year high with about 43,000 fatalities. So we need safer transportation solutions. At the Transportation Research Board, we understand that this problem needs to be solved, again, through collaboration. We need to look at every aspect of the work that we do and try and make the use of the system safer. But certainly, the promise of connected and automated technologies, we need some of those solutions as quickly as they can be deployed.
Nicely answered, very diplomatic. You didn't actually answer the question, but it was a mischievous question. I'll leave it out there. Online audience, you can pick up on it. Hello, good afternoon, welcome.
Thank you. John Bozell, President and CEO of CalSTART. Two very quick questions for the World Bank and other multilateral institutions. What can you do to help not only a grid become stable in a developing country, but renewable? Because we can't really talk about transportation electrification unless that is happening. And then what kind of facilities do you think you can start committing to in terms of fleet electrification, particularly in the developing world?
Okay, now thank you. This is a two-part question. So I think on the greening the energy, I mean, there is a lot of discussion and a lot of resource actually going to getting renewable energy. India is moving towards that. A number of countries in Africa are doing that. So the energy sector is getting decarbonized. Most of the NDCs, if you will, have energy decarbonization in there, but it does take quite a lot of resources, but I think it's happening. But with respect to electrification of transport, I think the conclusion that we're reaching in our research and many other people is you really don't have to wait until you decarbonize the power sector to start electrification. That's because there is energy efficiency to be gained, and then you could actually start doing that. And then there is this whole economies of scale in power transition. I joke with my energy teams, you guys have it easy. It's a binary problem that they have. There is a dirty power and you just go to clean power. In the transportation sector, it's very decentralized and everybody is doing in many ways. So it takes actually time. So once they switch, we don't have to wait for the switch, in other words. And also transport decarbonization takes time. Even here in the US, we only have like 7% penetration, so there is time for that. In terms of what we are doing in fleet renewals, we have a number of programs. I think in India, this morning you heard, there is a big program to electrify buses and two-wheelers and three-wheelers. Our entry point is mostly the public transport space or the two-wheelers and three-wheelers. We have a number of projects in Africa that are doing BRT. Now we're looking at financing structure where that could become financially affordable to the bus owners by blending our loans with other climate financing and grants, because we do need a blended finance structure as well as the private sector to make this financially viable. So there is a number of things happening out there, but it's going to take everyone's partnership and support. Yeah.
Any other thoughts from the panel before I move on? Okay. Hello, Grace. Grace is our chat moderator for our online audience.
Yes.
Grace, what's going on online?
Hi, Femi. The online audience is currently very enthusiastic about this session, and they were pretty excited about Andrew Steer's address. We have people mostly engaging from North America and then Africa. So we have two questions now. And the first question, it looks like Ben actually preempted the question, so I may not have to ask it, but it was about how the World Bank is supporting innovation and to accelerate climate action. But Ben answered it. But the second one is, what would you say is the most significant innovation that every developing country needs to adopt with regards to transportation, all things being equal? What would you say is the most significant innovation that every developing country needs to adopt with regards to transportation, all things being equal?
Good question online, like that. Manuela.
Well, I think that what we need to always remember is what everything we are doing is for people. So we need to understand what are their needs in the moment that we are deciding the public policy. Sometimes we think that the solution is for example, in the case of electrification of buses, I think that, of course, that is important, but most important is to have reliable systems that people want to use. People need to be safe and feel that the transport they are using is taking them to where they need to go in the time they need to go. So the kind of technology that you have in the bus is secondary, because if people, they have excellent buses, but they are not reliable, people won't use them. So I think that we have to put focus always in what people need, and then try to do the best related with, in this case, climate change, but thinking that if people are not going to use it, that is useless.
David, is every answer for you VinFast?
No, no, it's not.
Okay.
I was just going to say, I think, I'm not sure if it is of the four types of innovation outlined earlier, I don't think it is the disruptive kind. I think it's the small incremental kind of innovation that's most needed and most uniformly required across all developing countries. I think making that governmental decision, that the policy decision about wanting to have clean transportation and wanting to finance green transportation and doing it incrementally is probably the most pervasive and important decision to make.
Victoria.
At the end of the day, we're all engaged in this conversation because transportation matters. It impacts quality of life on a daily basis. So I would echo the sentiments of listen to the individuals that you serve. And providing safe, accessible, and affordable transportation means access to opportunity and will lead to a strong economy for your nation. So it starts with the people. That's why we do what we do.
Ben.
Well, so there isn't really one single one, but if I were to start thinking about one single innovation, I think, first of all, we need to get our institutions right. I mean, for all of this thing, whether it's innovation or whether it's financing to happen, we have to really reform our institutions, create the environment for people to innovate, for people to be thinking about it. Otherwise, if you have a bureaucratic system that doesn't do, I always joke that Uber was not invited in the Department of Transport in San Francisco, rather by a few people working. So we need an economic system that rewards innovation.
Hello.
Hi, my name is Liliana Shekerinska. I'm a senior transport specialist at the World Bank. My question is for David. As we are discussing with client countries electrification of transport, they're also wondering if they can benefit from the production of electric vehicles now or in the near future. What are the key factors for you when you decide on the location for production facilities? You mentioned incentives for infrastructure, education of workers, but you also mentioned very strong demand guarantees for the near future. So how would you rank the different factors?
Yeah, we've actually already made that decision. In part, we're locating a manufacturing facility here in the United States, in addition to our manufacturing facility in Vietnam. And some of the factors you outlined: cost of labor, cost of raw materials, supply chain infrastructure, cost of construction, transportation, power, all goes into the decision-making process around locating a factory. Obviously, following the Inflation Reduction Act legislation, there's an even more powerful incentive to locate such manufacturing facilities in the United States. And, we'll be a fortunate beneficiary of some of those benefits, notwithstanding the fact that we had made the decision to locate in the United States even substantially before the signing of that act. So those are the kind of decision factors that go into play. Does that answer the question?
Yes. Hello.
Hi, how are you? I'm Cecilia from the World Bank. And as much as we want to flatter ourselves policymakers, we policymakers are always behind the ball, because the largest, biggest, and more significant innovations come from the users. We cannot forget that the most important revolution in the last decade in transport has happened in a cell phone, okay? The super apps on Indonesia is actually coming from the users. The pink taxis for not safety but security of women in the Middle East come from the users. Pedicabs and rickshaws as the solution of the last mile provision come from users. So the question for all of you is, what have you done to listen these users' innovations and ideas? What have you done, or what are you planning to do?
So prior to coming to the Transportation Research Board, I was the Commissioner for Transportation in New Hampshire and part of the National Association of all the state highway departments. I say highway departments because that's what people think of when they think of the departments of transportation, but really they've become much more multimodal organizations over the years. And as I keep saying, in our work, we're more and more putting the person at the center. Who are the users of our system? What are the challenges that they have accessing the system today? Leveraging those ideas and innovations is critical to meeting their needs. So I would say there's been a real shift in terms of how all of the owner-operators of transportation infrastructure are doing their work. They are trying to find new ways to connect with their constituencies. They recognize that they need to also change the makeup of their workforce. How do you solve these problems if you don't have decision makers who represent the people that you're serving? And so I think in the United States in particular, there has been a remarkable change in how projects are advanced, how initiatives are debated, to ensure that public comment really is informing the work from the beginning, from concept through delivery, not state departments of transportation and municipalities coming up with solutions, then pitching them to the public to see what they think, actually starting to talk about what is the underlying issue, what is the problem that we're trying to solve, and then making sure that, like I said earlier, the technologies and the tools that those creative minds are developing are best leveraged to make sure that we're giving the people what they truly need from the systems.
If I may add into that, there's actually a fantastic book on digital revolution that came out a few years ago that talked about innovations these days not only happening on the supply side, but also on the demand side. So in a way, there is economies of scale on the supply side that leads in the reduction cost, but also there is economies of scale on the use of that technology and demand. So we have to work both on the supply and demand side. I think, Cecilia, you're absolutely right. But the question from a policy point of view is, do we just only support our incentives and subsidies only on the supply side, or should we also bring in a demand side, whether it's demand side subsidy, demand side incentives? Again, we don't have that kind of fiscal environment to do that subsidy. but there could be targeted subsidies. And this is where I think technology helps to pinpoint and to identify who the users are, who do you need to target. So if we want this disruption or this breakthrough, we have to get the demand side right, and that requires a much more different way of thinking about innovation than we have traditionally thought about the supply side.
Is that thinking here in the World Bank?
Well, that's our lead economist thinking about that. Cecilia, yes, of course. Well, you know, so in the traditional sense, for example, in Brazil, in Latin American countries, we have this some cards that are directly given to the users to take the bus. You know, the fact of the matter is, if you want to increase the utilization, even a traditional bus, you need that virtuous cycle. You need to first run it maybe on a pilot for empty, but then give incentives for people to take it through a subsidy. I mean, some countries are now going for free buses, thinking that that itself will create some increasing returns to scale and make the buses much more user-friendly. So the more you get people to use it, then the more service you would be forced to put in, and then that kind of creates a loop. So, you know, we have instruments that are on community service development that does that too. But this is not an easy one because, again, like I mentioned, it requires a shift. It requires different financial structure as well.
Mm-hmm. David.
A concrete example, I guess, I can think of is just being reactive and agile to customer demands around modes of ownership. So in Vietnam, whether it's two-wheel transportation or automotive transportation, vehicle finance is not as developed and prevalent as it is in other developed markets. So we were responsive to customers' requirements in that regard. We adopted a mode of ownership where a user could buy a car or a motorbike, a scooter, but separately lease the battery from us, thereby reducing the upfront capital cost of the vehicle and allowing them to, I guess, defease the cost of ownership through the life. I think somebody mentioned it in relation to truck transportation in the prior session as well. And indeed, many of our fleet customers, either here in the States or in Europe, are investigating new subscription modes of utility and ownership as well. So I think for us, it's really about being adaptive and agile to listening to the customers and how they want to own and pay for the vehicle.
Manuela, what's happening in Buenos Aires? Are people who use transport in Buenos Aires, are they influencing you? Are you able to listen to them? Are they pushing innovation, or is it coming top down?
Well, we have a little bit of everything. We have some people from the private sector that are wanting to innovate, especially in micromobility. Our public transport system is quite old and consolidated, but what we have been doing in the last years is to have a lot of information, real-time information that is an open source, so everybody can have it. So there you have many apps that are working on that. So right now you can have a lot of information on how to move from one place to another one, including buses, trains, the bike share system also. So you know how many bikes there are in a station and how and where, and if you want to know where you have to go, what happens in the other station. So it's very important for people to decide where to use that. But basically, we are working a lot on that in having open data so that everybody who wants to innovate can do it with all the information we have in the city.
Mm-hmm. Hello.
Hi, my name is Andrea Sanquil. I'm from the Center for Urban Sustainability in Costa Rica and from the Global Network for Popular Transportation. My question had a little bit to do with some of the things you've been mentioning. Innovation needs an enabling environment and an ecosystem in order to thrive. And that requires funding, as David mentioned, but also finance, as Binyam also mentioned. So these can either stifle or enable or just kind of allow innovation to happen. So I just wanted to ask for some examples of what type of policies or how regulation, policy, or finance can make innovation thrive, because it's usually coming from the bottom up, but just in order for it not to be stifled by regulation and finance, can you provide some examples of ways that, in terms of regulation or finance, you're enabling innovation? Thanks.
Does any come to mind?
I can maybe give some example of, again, from India, where the challenge is to electrify buses and two-wheeler and three-wheelers at scale. But then the investors that go there have certain risks that they are not willing to bear. So they look for some partial risk guarantee or so-called first loss guarantees. So when you create the financing structure in such a way that you minimize part of the risk to the private sector, then you can make that happen. So in this kind of innovative technology, new things that when we pilot, some of the risks had to be borne by the public sector or by some international organization that is supporting the public sector. So we're working with the government in India, for example, to create this risk-sharing facility at scale. So those are the kind of examples we have to have, really. And then there are many others as well in many other countries, similar type.
Let's go back to our online audience. Grace, what do you have for us?
Currently, the kind of chat that is going on is centered around how to innovate by building capacity of the current paratransit modes. There are currently a few questions for the panelists. So the first one is, what kind of significant solutions are being developed for those with varying kinds of disabilities? What kind of significant solutions are being developed for those with varying kinds of disabilities? And also, one of the people in the chat stated that motorcycle innovation has proven very successful in transporting biospecimens from hard-to-reach rural terrains to the central labs for testing and diagnosis in times of the pandemic. And so how does one expand networks of these kind of innovative transportation systems? Those are the questions we have. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, online audience. People with disabilities. Victoria,
I can start.
Get us started.
So yes, of course, as all of our owner-operators advanced projects, they have to ensure that they are accommodating individuals with disabilities. But there's also been a shift in how we talk about providing those designs that are truly accessible to all. It is now recognized that if a facility is accessible to an individual in a wheelchair, as an example, that facility is also easier for a parent to negotiate with a stroller, for the business traveler who's got their suitcase to get from point A to point B. And so I think there's now a recognition that ergonomically, not only are these the right things to do, it makes the experience more positive for everybody who's using the system. And so again, it's talking about all the users and how we can meet their needs, and making it better for one really does make it better for all.
Manuela, how are you managing in Buenos Aires catering to people with disabilities using public transport?
Well, we have, the first thing is what we have been doing in the city is make sidewalks walkable, and also for people with disabilities, for babies with the strollers. So that is a very important thing, because sometimes you think that you have to have, for example, an elevator in the metro station, but if people cannot arrive to the metro station because there are not sidewalks at the end, that is not affordable for everybody. So we have been working a lot on that. Related with the public transport, we have in our buses, they are all 100% accessible. So you have a wheelchair or other kind of need, they are prepared for that. In our BRT system, we have elevated stations so that you can use them. And also we are working a lot in having like what we call public transport bulbs, so people can wait and can go inside the bus in a more comfortable way, because if not, sometimes you have cars parking where they shouldn't. So that is something that we have been doing in a lot of places in the city, especially around hospitals, around schools, and transfer areas, so that people can arrive to the bus or other questions. And in the metro, because we are in charge of the metro in Buenos Aires City, we have a plan to be able to have 100% on the network accessible by 2035. You know, the biggest challenge is that our metro system is very old, so we have to do a lot of public works to make that happen, but we are in that path also with the metro.
Grace, that second question, I'm going to actually give back to the virtual audience, because I feel that there's a lot of expertise in that area online. And now I'm going to move back to the room. Hello.
Hi, Margarita from Clean Energy Works. Thank you for the panel. I have a question. I wonder about your thoughts of all of you about this innovation that is not very new, but is about reduced consumption of materials by repowering existing vehicles. Right now, as we speak, millions of cars and buses and trucks are being built. And if we really want to reduce the cost to make these cars cleaner, why are we not talking more about repowering? That will also help with local economies, because that could give jobs, not just to the countries who can afford to have manufacturers in their countries, but to many countries right now that had to import, and we're importing second-hand cars. So I'm wondering, why is that not an innovation that we can talk about here?
David.
Well, there are a number of companies who do focus on retrofitting batteries and electric drivetrains to previously combustion engine powered vehicles. From our perspective, we stopped making combustion engine cars and are making pure EV cars. We don't have a business model around retrofitting cars, although perhaps we should indeed investigate it. I know there is an oft-cited kind of numbers about the carbon intensity and the carbon impact of making a new car versus retrofitting an old one. But at the end of the day, cars and EVs are efficient and efficiently powered and have optimal range based on being designed from the outset for that purpose. And you don't necessarily get the same benefits from an efficiency or a range or a user utility perspective from retrofitting a pre-existing car.
I am going to ask all of you, panel, to think ahead to the next 20 years, so celebrating the 40th anniversary of TT. Who will still be here? And what does transport look like? But I'm only going to give you 30 seconds to do that in. Manuela's like, don't start with me. I won't. David.
So this is a kind of a pet topic of mine. I think in the future, high-density urban environments, eVTOL and use of the third dimension rather than an inherently constrained two-dimensional surface of road transportation will become a very efficient mode of city transportation.
Interesting. Binyam.
Okay, I think...
When you're 25.
Yes. So I think for me, the future of transport should be shared. We should share vehicles. It should be electric, and it should be autonomous or connected. So that way we can reach a lot of our goals. We have less cars on the road, but they're also burning clean energy, and then we don't have to drive it.
I love this future, a future when I will be a good driver. Manuela.
Well, I think one of the things that we will have more bikes in the streets again. Probably, as being said, it will be autonomous cars, shared cars. And I think that also related with something that is very important in the cities, that is logistics. It will be probably drones or kind of vehicles, because I think that what also pandemic brought is this e-commerce that has also changed a lot the way goods move in the city.
Victoria, what would 20 years look like?
So I think certainly we'll see full deployment of electric vehicles and connected and automated technologies. But really, my hope is that we have a safe transportation system where we don't lose any lives across all the modes of transportation, and that it is affordable and accessible.
Yeah, amazing. So we are out of time, but can I ask you, what does your future look like in 20 years' time? I'm going to make you an honorary panel member.
So
just to assuage the disappointment of not asking your question. Go ahead.
That's okay. My name is Nayel Ureña Cerulle from ICF, not to be confused with IFC, another company. My future is very much in line with the safe future, but the problem with that is that we need to be very careful with how we build it. We have an opportunity here to leapfrog and not to make the same mistakes that we've made in the transportation system as we have it right now. As we're building new type of vehicles, new type of electric vehicles with new modules, new ways to figure it out how they are, we need to make sure that they're inclusive and accessible, but accessible not only from a physical perspective, but also accessible to all to buy, which is a question that I was going to ask. Is kind of like how.
But you are not going to
I'm not gonna
ask. So thank you so much for your contribution. Take a seat. Very sneaky, but I like your style. All right, David, Manuela, Binyam, and Victoria, thank you so much for pushing us into the future, thinking about innovation in many different ways to help us really tackle climate crisis and also our development goals, but thinking around tech, transport, how we can do things better. We appreciate you. Thank you. Your plenary panel.